There's a sign in childhood, a signal that can predict narcissistic tendencies in adulthood, and it's not what most people think. It's not the child constantly craving attention. It's not the kid who always seems arrogant or entitled. It's not the one who boasts about being better than everyone else. The most dangerous signal is far more subtle. It's almost invisible. It's silent and often mistaken for something positive. Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist, spent decades studying the roots of narcissism, and he identified a pattern that emerges long before narcissistic behavior becomes overtly apparent. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal this sign to you. I'll explain why it's so dangerous, and I'll give you some tools, actionable steps you can take to intervene before it's too late. If you're a parent, a teacher, or simply someone who wants to understand how narcissists are formed, this video could change the way you see the children around you. Let's start with the sign itself. The most dangerous sign is the child who stops asking for help. Let me explain. Every young child asks for help. It's natural. It's healthy. Children simply cannot do everything on their own. They rely on adults for survival. When a child falls, they cry, and they look for their mom or dad. When they can't open a jar, they ask for assistance. When they're scared, they seek comfort. This is the normal behavior of a healthy childhood psyche. But something happens in some children. At some point, they just stop. They stop crying when they fall. They stop asking for help when they need it. They stop seeking comfort when they're afraid. They learn to do everything themselves. They learn not to need anyone. They learn that asking for help is dangerous. And many parents look at this and think it's a good thing. Wow, look how independent my child is. Look how little trouble they cause. Look how strong they are. But Jung saw something entirely different. He saw a child who had given up, a child who had learned that their pleas for help would go unanswered, a child who decided unconsciously that it's safer not to need anyone. And this is the moment the seed of narcissism is planted. Let me explain the psychology behind it. When a baby is born, it's completely dependent. They cannot survive without care. Their psyche is designed to seek connection, to signal needs, to expect a response. In healthy development, the baby's needs are met. Not perfectly, of course, but sufficiently. The mom responds to the crying. The dad offers security. The child learns that the world is a place where their needs matter. This experience forms what Jung called a cohesive self, a sense that you exist, that you matter, that you can depend on others. But when those needs are not met, repeatedly, something different happens. The child cries and no one comes. Or someone comes, but they're angry that the child is crying. Or someone comes but doesn't offer what the child actually needs. After many repetitions, the child learns. Crying doesn't work. Asking for help doesn't work. I have to do this myself. And at that moment, a part of the psyche shuts down. The part that depends on others, the part that trusts, the part that is vulnerable. What emerges in its place is a false self, a construct that appears strong, independent, self-sufficient, but that on the inside is empty. Jung described this process in great detail. He observed that the child who stops asking for help doesn't stop having needs. The needs are still there. What changes is the relationship to them. The child develops shame about needing, develops anger at themselves for having needs, develops a contempt for weakness that they will later project onto others. They begin to see themselves as special for not needing, superior to others who still depend, stronger, more evolved, better. This is a compensation, an attempt to transform the pain of rejection into something tolerable. But the pain doesn't disappear. It stays buried, fueling a structure that becomes increasingly rigid. This is the basic structure of narcissism. Now, let me show you how this sign manifests at different ages. In early childhood, from 0 to 3 years old, the sign appears subtly. It's the infant who stops crying when their parents leave the room. Not because they're okay, but because they've learned that crying brings no comfort. It's the baby who self-soothes prematurely, who doesn't reach out to be picked up, who seems indifferent to the presence or absence of caregivers. Pediatricians often interpret this as having an easy temperament, but Jung saw it as a warning sign, an infant psyche that has given up on seeking connection. In middle childhood, from 3 to 7 years old, the sign becomes more visible. It's the child who doesn't ask for help with their homework, who doesn't tell their parents when something bad happens at school, who solves all their problems on their own. It's the child who seems to need no one, who is praised for being mature, who adults use as an example for other children. On the inside, this child is alone, completely alone. They've learned that adults are unreliable, that their needs don't matter, that it's safer not to need. In pre-adolescence, from 7 to 12 years old, the pattern solidifies. The child develops a persona of self-sufficiency. They may seem arrogant, superior, detached, but this persona is a mask. Behind it exists the same child who learned that they couldn't trust, that they couldn't ask, that they couldn't need. Jung called this ego inflation. The ego expands to compensate for the inner emptiness. The child becomes too big because on the inside they feel non-existent. Now, let me explain something that Jung considered fundamental: the difference between healthy independence and defensive self-sufficiency. Healthy independence develops gradually. The child learns to do things on their own because they have a secure base, because they know that if they need it, someone will be there. Defensive self-sufficiency is different. The child does everything on their own because they've learned that they can't count on anyone. It's not a choice, it's a necessity for survival. The first leads to an adult who can depend on others when they need to. The second leads to an adult who cannot. Many parents confuse the two. They see the child who does everything on their own and think it's maturity. But you need to look at the why. Is the child doing it alone because they feel secure or because they've learned that they can't trust? It's important to understand why this happens. Children don't choose to become this way. No one wakes up in the morning and decides not to need anyone. This is a survival response. When the environment doesn't meet their needs, the childhood psyche has to do something. It can't simply accept that no one will help. That would be intolerable. So, it changes the narrative. It decides that it doesn't need help, that it's strong enough on its own, that it's others who are weak for needing each other. And it's a brilliant solution. From a survival point of view, it transforms the pain of rejection into pride in independence. But it's a solution that comes at a huge cost. The cost is the capacity for intimacy, the ability to trust, the ability to receive love. The child who stops asking for help becomes the adult who can't depend on anyone, who sabotages relationships when they get too close, who uses others as mirrors for their ego inflation, but never truly connects. This is narcissism. Now let me show you the risk factors. The first factor is emotional neglect. Parents who are physically present but emotionally absent, who feed and clothe the child but don't respond to their emotions, who are always too busy, too tired, too distracted. The child in these environments learns that their physical needs can be met, but that no one cares about how they feel. This is particularly dangerous because it leaves no visible scars. Now the child has a home, food, clothes. It seems like they have everything, but inside, they are starving emotionally. The second factor is the rejection of vulnerability. Parents who respond negatively when the child shows weakness, who say, "Stop crying," who punish fear or sadness, who demand that the child be strong before they have the structure to be. The child in these environments learns that vulnerability is dangerous, that showing need brings punishment, that it's safer to hide everything that seems weak. This creates an internal division, a part of the psyche that feels, but that must be hidden. A part that appears to the world, but is empty. The third factor is parentification. When the child is placed in the role of caregiver, when they have to take care of their siblings, or the emotionally unstable dad, or the depressed mom, the child in these environments learns that their needs don't matter, that their role is to attend to others, never to be attended to, that asking for something for themselves would be selfishness. This creates what Carl Jung called inverted narcissism. The person seems altruistic, always taking care of others. But inside, the same structure exists, the same inability to receive, the same difficulty with true intimacy. Jung saw this pattern as a defense mechanism, a way for the individual to feel valued by constantly fulfilling the needs of others, while neglecting their own inner world. The fourth factor is inconsistency. Parents who sometimes attend, sometimes reject, who are unpredictable in their responses, where the child never knows what to expect. The child in these environments learns that they can't trust anyone, that even when someone seems to care, they can turn their back at any moment. This creates chronic anxiety and an eventual decision that it's safer not to need anyone. Better to be alone than risk being abandoned. The fifth factor is emotional role reversal. When parents use the child to regulate their own emotions, when they expect the child to console them, when they unload adult problems onto them, the child learns that their own emotions are less important, that their role is to take care of others, never of themselves, that showing their needs would be burdening someone who is already overburdened. This creates a child who seems mature beyond their age, who seems strong, but who never had space to be a child. The sixth factor is the demand for perfection. Parents who only demonstrate approval when the child does everything right, who criticize any mistake, who establish impossible standards. The child learns that love is conditional, that they need to be perfect to be accepted, that any weakness will be punished. They stop asking for help, because asking for help means admitting that they can't do it. And admitting that they can't do it means losing love. Now let me explain how to intervene. The intervention depends on the age of the child and the depth of the damage, but there are principles that work in any situation. The first principle is to make it safe to ask for help. If the child has stopped asking, it means they've learned that asking is dangerous. To reverse this, you need to create repeated experiences where asking is safe. This means responding positively when the child asks for anything. It means never punishing or criticizing requests for help. It means celebrating vulnerability. Don't expect the child to start asking out of nowhere. You need to create opportunities. Ask if they need help. Offer before they ask. Show that you are available. Gradually. If the experience is consistently positive, the child may start to risk again. The second principle is to validate emotions. The child who stops asking for help often also stops expressing emotions. They've learned that their emotions don't matter or cause problems. To reverse this, you need to validate everything they feel without judging, without trying to fix it, without minimizing. If they are sad, you say, "It makes sense that you're sad." If they are angry, you say, "I understand that you're angry." If they are afraid, you say, "It's normal to be afraid of that." It seems simple. But for children who have never had their emotions validated, this is revolutionary. The third principle is to model vulnerability. Children learn by observing. If the adults around them never ask for help, never show weakness, never admit that they need others, the child learns that this is what's expected. Show the child that adults also ask for help, that adults also feel fear, that adults also need others. This gives permission. It shows that vulnerability isn't failure, that needing others is human. You can say things like, "I need your help with this," or "I'm having a hard day." It doesn't need to be big or dramatic. Small moments of authentic vulnerability are enough. The child observes everything. If they see that adults ask for help and nothing bad happens, they start to consider that maybe it's safe for them too. The fourth principle is to create connection without demand. Many parents only interact with the child when they want something, when it's time to do homework, when it's time to eat, when it's time to sleep. The child learns that connection comes with demand, that proximity means that something will be required. Create moments of connection where you don't want anything. Sit next to them without purpose. Be present without an agenda. Show that you are there simply because you want to be. This teaches that relationship can be safe, that proximity doesn't mean control. The fifth principle is to be consistent. If you start responding positively but then go back to rejecting, the damage will be greater. The child was right not to trust. Consistency is crucial. If you promise to be available, be. If you said that they can tell you anything, listen without judging when they tell you. This takes time. The child won't trust immediately. They will test. They will wait for the rejection. It will take time to believe that things have changed. Be patient. Be consistent. Keep showing her it's safe, even when she doesn't believe it yet. Now let me tell you about the signs that the intervention is working. The first sign is the child starting to ask for small things, a glass of water, help with a simple chore. It seems insignificant, but it's enormous. It means she's testing whether it's safe. The second sign is the child starting to express negative emotions, anger, sadness, frustration. Before, she hid everything. Now she's starting to show it. This means she's beginning to trust that she won't be punished for feeling. The third sign is the child starting to seek physical proximity, sitting close, asking for a hug, wanting to be together. Before, she kept her distance as protection. Now she's starting to take a risk. The fourth sign is the child starting to talk about things that bother her, problems at school, conflicts with friends, fears. Before, she kept everything bottled up. Now she's starting to share. These signs may seem small, but each one represents a huge victory. A child who decided it was safer to need no one is starting to take a risk again. Celebrate every small step, but not in an exaggerated way that feels like pressure. Just respond with presence and care. Now let me tell you about when professional help is necessary. If the child is already showing clear signs of narcissism, such as a lack of empathy, manipulation, extreme grandiosity, family intervention may not be enough. If the patterns are too deeply ingrained, specialized child therapy is needed. A professional can create a safe environment for the child to relearn to trust. If the parents are part of the problem, which they often are, family therapy is essential. There's no point in working on the child if the environment that created the problem remains the same. It's important not to be ashamed to seek help. Recognizing that you need support isn't a failure. It's exactly the opposite of the narcissism you want to prevent. In fact, seeking help is modeling for the child exactly the behavior you want her to learn. You're showing that adults also need support, that asking for help is normal and healthy. Some parents resist therapy because they think they should be able to solve it on their own. That admitting they need a professional is admitting failure. But that's exactly the pattern you're trying to break in the child. The idea that needing help is weakness, that we should do everything alone. If you want your child to learn to ask for help, you need to learn first. Now, an important reflection. If you recognized yourself in this description, not as a parent, but as the child who stopped asking for help, know that it's never too late. The patterns created in childhood are strong, but they aren't permanent. The brain is plastic. New patterns can be created at any age. The first step is to recognize it, to see that you stop asking for help not because you're strong, but because you learned it wasn't safe, that your self-sufficiency isn't a virtue, but a defense. The second step is to take a risk. Start asking for small things, showing small vulnerabilities, testing if it's safe to need someone. This is terrifying. Your whole system will scream that it's dangerous, that you'll be rejected, that it's safer to remain alone. Your body will react. Anxiety, panic, the urge to flee. These are normal reactions when you do something that your childhood psyche classified as dangerous. Don't let these reactions stop you. They're echoes of the past. They aren't signs of real danger in the present. That system was created in a situation that no longer exists. You're no longer a child dependent on caregivers who didn't respond. You're an adult who can choose who to associate with. You can choose safe people. You can leave relationships that don't work. You can protect yourself in ways you couldn't when you were a child. Find safe people, therapists, friends, partners who demonstrate the ability to respond, and start slowly. One small request at a time. The capacity to depend on others can be rebuilt. Intimacy can be relearned. True connection is possible. Carl Jung believed deeply in the psyche's ability to heal. Even deep wounds from childhood can be transformed, not erased, but integrated, used as a source of wisdom instead of a prison. He observed that people who have done this work often become extraordinarily empathetic because they know the pain, because they understand what it's like to need and not be met, because they know the price of disconnection. According to Jung, the wound becomes a gift, not because it was necessary or good, but because it can be transformed. And this transformation is possible at any age. Jung worked with people in their 70s and 80s who finally learned to trust, who finally discovered that they could need someone. It's never too late. Now, let me tell you about a case that illustrates all of this. A 6-year-old girl was brought to therapy because she had no friends. At school, she stayed alone. At home, she stayed in her room. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't complain about anything. She seemed completely self-sufficient. The parents thought she was just introverted. that it was her temperament, that she didn't need much social interaction. But the therapist saw something different. She saw a child who had given up, who had learned, at some point, that it was no use trying. The investigation revealed that the parents worked a lot, that the girl was with babysitters who changed frequently, that when she finally saw her parents, they were tired and impatient. The girl learned that her requests for attention were annoying, that being invisible was safer, that needing someone brought problems. At 6 years old, she had already built a fortress around herself. She had already given up on connection. She was already on the path to narcissism. The intervention was long. The parents had to radically change their priorities. They had to create time for connection without demand. They had to respond consistently when she risked asking for something. The girl resisted at first. She tested her parents many times, expecting the rejection that always came before. There were moments when the parents wanted to give up. It was difficult. It required time they didn't have. It required patience they didn't know they had. It required confronting their own failures. But they persevered. Because they understood what was at stake, not just their daughter's present, but her entire future, her relationships, her ability to love and be loved. The therapist helped them understand that every small rejection, every moment of impatience, reconfirmed for the girl that she was right not to trust. That consistency was absolutely essential. But little by little, with consistency and patience, something started to change. She started to ask for small things. It started showing when she was sad. She started seeking out her mom and dad when she needed comfort. That first spontaneous hug came after 8 months of work. The mom cried. That simple gesture represented a tectonic shift in her daughter's psyche, a profound change. By 10 years old, she was a different child. She had friends, expressed emotions, asked for help when she needed it. The fortress didn't disappear completely. Probably never will. But it stopped being her only way of existing in the world. She developed the ability to choose when to be independent and when to ask for help. She learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, that connection isn't loss of self, and the parents changed too. They learned to see beyond the superficial behavior, to recognize that the child who asks for nothing is the child who needs it most. That silence doesn't mean everything is okay. This shows that intervention is possible, that the path of narcissism can be diverted, that children can relearn to trust. And this case isn't unique. There are thousands of stories like this. Children who were on the path to narcissism and were rescued by parents who decided to change. The common denominator in all these stories is the same. Adults who recognized the problem, who assumed responsibility, who did the difficult work of changing. The child can't save themselves alone. They need adults who see beyond the mask, who understand that self-sufficiency isn't strength, but defense, who respond to the silent cry for help. But it requires commitment. It requires consistency. It requires that the adults change first. Now, one last important reflection. If you're reading this as an adult who recognizes this pattern in yourself, I want you to know something. It's not your fault. You were a child. You did what you needed to survive. The self-sufficiency you developed protected you in situations that were otherwise intolerable. But now you're an adult, and that same self-sufficiency that protected you in childhood may be limiting you now. It prevents you from having deep relationships, prevents you from receiving true love, prevents you from knowing the peace that comes from knowing that you're not alone. The good news is that patterns can change. The brain is plastic. New pathways can be created at any age. It won't be easy. Your psyche will resist. It will seem dangerous. It will trigger anxiety and fear. But on the other side, there's something you've never known. The experience of being seen, attended to, loved without having to do anything to deserve it. It's worth facing the fear for that. Carl Jung spent his life helping people make this journey. He knew it was possible, that even deep wounds from childhood can be healed, that the psyche has a natural tendency to seek integration and health. Trust that tendency. Trust the process. Trust that you can learn what you were never taught. Until the next video. And remember, the child who seems to need no one is the child who needs it most. Don't be fooled by the mask of self-sufficiency. Behind it, there's a silent cry for help. Respond to that cry before it's too late. And if you are that child, now an adult, know that it's never too late to ask for help. Never too late to learn to trust. Never too late to discover that you don't have to do everything alone. The first step is the most difficult, but you can take that step. And each step after it gets a little easier. You deserve connection. You deserve intimacy. You deserve to be seen. The child inside you is still waiting, still has hope, even after so much time, still wants to believe that someone will respond. Be that person for yourself, and then find others who can be that for you too. Start now, the first small step, and then the next, and then the next. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Take that step today. You can. You deserve it. You are worthy of love and connection.